Dylan, thoughts on Virginia Supreme Court and gerrymandering? Where do you stand on Supreme Court expansion at the federal and state level?
My stance is, number one, it is atrocious that there was a decision about this by the Supreme Court after they did the vote, after the tens of millions of dollars were spent, after everybody's time and effort was wasted, both those in favor of the gerrymandering in Virginia and against the gerrymandering in Virginia. And they only waited until the entire process was done, the public had made a decision, and it was different than what the court wanted, that the court came out and made that 4-3 decision. The timing is just so atrocious and is just so bad. If they could have done it just like a few months or any time, like in any of the lead up, that would have been much better. That's the first thought I have. The second thought I have is that this is not an off-ramp. That in an ideal scenario, this would still mean the Republicans are probably netting during this gerrymandering war. But in an ideal scenario, one could say, hey, the Democrats tried, they failed, this is a good place to stop, while we got like the edge on the Democrats by a bit. Because if they kept going, there is a possibility that, okay, Maryland pulls the trigger, a bunch of other states could pull the trigger. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think there's going to be an off-ramp, mostly because there's not a desire for an off-ramp from the top when it comes to President Donald Trump. And there doesn't seem to be the incentives from it inside the Republican Party. The 5 Indiana Republicans that got yeeted out of office because they didn't want to gerrymander their state. They thought it was against their principles. And the fact that the Republican Party was willing to spend millions of dollars to do that, that indicates to me that they're willing, that not only does the leadership want to do this, but they're willing to penalize people for not getting in line. And so next time they try to approach any state about this, I think it's going to be easier due to Indiana's, well, it's purging of those who don't want to gerrymander. So I think that this is not an off-ramp. Thirdly, I think Florida is still going to go forward. There's, of course, still a court case in Florida, but the Florida Constitution and the Virginia Constitution are two different things. And so you could have a scenario where the Virginian Supreme Court rejects them being able to rewrite the map, but the Floridian Supreme Court says that's perfectly fine, even though both in the case of Florida and Texas, there was no vote. There was no referendum. This was something purely decided by the party leadership of the party that would benefit from this, not by voters, not by, a bipartisan consensus, not from the federal level. Like it's completely one party and their leadership knowing they would benefit the most, going in and changing the rules without input from the voters. I think in the vast majority of instances, voters would reject the idea of killing the character of their electoral districts. And that's what you have to do in this system to make it work. You have to kill the character of the electoral district. You have to cut up Memphis into 3 separate districts, which means that, the values held by a city, which is a real thing. You go to San Fran, they have values. You go to Los Angeles, they have values. You go to different communities, they have values. And those values can be different when you talk about rural communities, urban communities, or even different urban centers. And so to cut up Memphis in 3 ways, to just like completely try to eliminate that black representation, a black voting power, and say it was done on partisan lines, well, the whole time your leadership admits that you only use census data. Well, if you only use census data and you're drawing the lines along partisan lines, how are you deciding where the partisan lines draw? You have to use demographic information. Well, what demographic information is that going to be right after the Voting Rights Act was gutted? What is that going to mean in practical terms? So that's my general view on this. I hate gerrymandering. I'm from Maryland. We're a state that could be a one-party state on the representation level. We could get rid of Andy Harris, and to be honest, I wouldn't be too upset to see him go. But I think on principle, it creates a more divided society. When you have people engaging in gerrymandering, all you have to do is appeal to your base in the primary, ignore what the actual community as a whole, as a full picture, not chopped up into itty bitty bits, Like you can ignore their values. You can ignore what they want because you're secure as long as you continue to win the primary and you don't gain the ire of party leadership. And I think that, combined with the rejection of election results, combined with the partisanship we see in three-letter media, the algorithm motivating people to go to blows with one another, as well as just like the horrific stuff we see from there, the way that our president talks, the way that our president behaves, the going after of separate broadcasters of a different stripe, going after the broadcasting licenses. I think all of these things stack together to make us a more and more and more and more partisan society. And this can create like a certain amount of social breakdown. And I think that if we get to a situation where we openly accept mid-decade ignoring the census, mid-decade redistricting whenever it is beneficial, where, oh, we lost a House seat. Well, don't worry, we can just redistrict it. We can just redistrict it back.
A curd is a curd.
It's rot.
8D5D2 Derek has donated $5. If you had a PAC Supreme Court button, would you push it? What if you had a future scope that told you if you didn't push it, Republicans would control the Supreme Court till you're...
I don't want to pack the Supreme Court because I feel like the same way we have a race to the bottom right now with gerrymandering, packing courts, I imagine you could do the same thing. All it would take is one strong enough Republican majority, and if we packed it to like, I don't know, we say 15, they can pack it to 25. And so I think that this might be like possibly a short-term fix for a bunch of court decisions I would like to see go differently, whether it had to be Roe v. Wade, whether it is the Civil Rights Act being maintained. But I don't know how much of a long-term solution it really is. And in order to do that, you would have to also kill the filibuster realistically in this political environment. You would have to kill the filibuster and then on top of that, pack the Supreme Court. And you'd be getting rid of two guardrails that had previously restricted past administrations, Republican and Democrat. Both sides had generally respected the filibuster, with there being very niche exceptions being made. If it was to be completely done away with, and then you pack the court on top of it, so that makes me extremely nervous. It makes me nervous about the health of the republic. It makes me nervous about what happens when Republicans get in power. It makes me nervous about the fact that I don't know if I trust really any politician with the power to pack the Supreme Court, whether they're Democrat or Republican. If my question was, would I rather have the Supreme Court say, you know, get rid of all of the advancements we've made in the last 60, 80 years when it comes to constitutional law, and Trump can be president forever, and we'll ignore like him try to... There's like a certain point where you would either have to wipe the Supreme Court and start from scratch or pack the Supreme Court. I might like imagine a scenario like that, but that is an outcome that I would like to avoid. That's what I would like. I would like to avoid that outcome. And I also don't think that the idea, well, you know, this is Supreme Court forever. If we win in 2028 and we have 8 years in office, we will likely replace one liberal Supreme Court. And whether or not we replace Justice Clarence Thomas, whether or not we replace some other more conservative Supreme Court justices, we'd have to wait and see. But I think Clarence Thomas would probably be near the top of that list, or will he be alive 10 years from now? So I think that if Democrats were to win in 2028 and we don't lose that one liberal justice we got sitting on the bench on the edge, we keep him up to the next election and we win back-to-back 2 terms, then I think we can start to like regain. Whereas the other strategy of packing the court, you've got to first get rid of the filibuster, then pack the court. And I saw FDR failed to do that. And if Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who, I mean, that's the closest I can think of in recent and living memory for that the idea that there's people alive of the Democrats having a one-party state. That's the closest we've ever gotten to it. And it still failed under those circumstances. And now we're supposed to do it with the existence of the filibuster. That's why first you'd have to get rid of it. And all of that makes me very nervous. I'm more nervous about packing the Supreme Court than I am getting rid of the filibuster. I think I'd be more willing to get rid of the filibuster than I would pack the Supreme Court. because there's other countries that exist and survive without the filibuster. But I don't know of many countries that like continuously like pack the Supreme Court that don't end up turning it into shitholes. To be blunt. Wait, I almost forgot. I have to ask you something. What do you think of packing the Supreme Court? Good, bad?
I mean, I don't know what the ultimate consequences would be, but like on its face, I think it's good. It's like, yeah, fuck like, why do we have 40-year members? Why are we allowed to steal seats? Like, this is bullshit. Like, all right, well, let's add another like 3 seats. Then they can make them live in there for 40 years. Fuck you guys. Yeah, I'm on board in principle for sure.
Does it not scare you the idea of like, you know, like a JD Vance or something getting up there and them just stacking it even more until they can do whatever the hell they want?
Yeah, to me, it's like, if you're going to steal a seat and we're not willing to steal the seat, then we should escalate. I don't know where that gets us exactly, but hold on. Josiah wants to talk to us.
Oh.
Don't leave yet.
Fuck, there he is.
Hello.
Dylan, what's up, baby? How are you, buddy?
I'm doing the best I can. I'm staying busy. I'm staying busy, hustling the best I can out here.
Are you back in the States or are you back in Ukraine?
Back in the crane.
Damn. All right. I mean, I hear Trump says that there's a 3-day ceasefire going on. Is that true?
We'll see. I mean, I don't have any belief in the Russians have violated every ceasefire that Trump has negotiated. So if we go off historical trends, I should blow up in the next 5 minutes.
Well, don't say that. Jesus, that'd be awful. But I mean, think of the content, but that'd be awful.
My God, I would be.
It's going to affect me in the worst way too, Josiah. I'm going to be like, Dylan, give me Uber. Dylan, Uber, Dylan, Uber, and you're going to be dead. So,
do you think the mods on live stream fails would remove that?
Do I think they should, or do I think they would?
They would. Do you think they would?
So I don't follow that subreddit particularly closely, but you would be trending and your subscriber count would just blow the fuck up.
I finally get a play button. Oh my God.
Yes, you would. Posthumously.
Like the Medal of Honor,
yeah.
Which
one of us would you want to eulogize you?
Rob Noor.
I feel like I might do a disservice. I mean,
Rob Noor.
But I don't know Dylan long enough. There's got to be someone with like the Dylan history lexicon, right?
CTV maybe.
Question.
Critically thinking veteran would be fun.
Is that the guy who always wore the sunglasses and had a strong Southern accent?
Yeah, the wolf.
Okay, there you go.
The leader of the wolf pack, he called his audience.
Yeah, I just have this like mental image of him wearing his shades and, you know, having like his, I don't know, like a fucking like USA tattoo on his like upper left pec, and he's gonna be like smashing Busch Light cans and stuff like that. Maybe shotgun one in your honor. I've got this whole perception of him.
That's what I'm looking for.
Well, listen, I hope you are safe, and I didn't mean to crash the party, but I actually had no idea that you guys were in a conversation when I did a super chat in Dylan's stream earlier, because I haven't talked to him in a while, and I asked him about the Virginia Supreme Court thingy, and then I saw that the SoyPill here was live, and it's like, it's pure serendipity. It's pure serendipity.
Yeah. Me and Dylan actually planned to exclude you from this, and you just had to come in. But you know, whatever. It's fine that you're here now.
I basically invite myself. That's the whole point. I mean, I think once you're at a certain point and you have no fucks left to give, you're just like, hey, let me in. You know, I'm that friend like in all those sitcoms that just walks into your house. You know,
hey,
what I mean? Like,
it's Josiah. Clap, clap,
hey,
clap, 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 clap. And he's like, oh, you won't believe the shenanigans I just got into. Oh,
it's like Kramer from Seinfeld, which is a criminally overrated show. That show fucking sucks.
So SoyPill, should we leave all those black women of color that were gonna come on, like just waiting as Josiah says what he wants to say?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean,
okay,
like
cool.
I am trying to fight the DEI initiative, so I'm like doing anti-DEI, and only white men are allowed.
You were having some sort of DEI initiative? The president has banned DEI.
No, exactly. I'm trying to counter. We were woke for far too long, and there's years of reparations for the white man are owed. So.
Well, Dylan, I want to persuade you real quick. I want to persuade you to change your mind on court packing. First, I want to say you gave an incredibly thoughtful answer to my general question about what you thought about the Supreme Court decision in Virginia. Like, it was beautiful. And people who have not heard it should go back to Dylan's stream at some point and listen to it, because just off the cuff, and I don't know if you're high or you're crossfaded or whatever, if you reach like a certain level of enlightenment, but you like just extemporaneously gave a beautiful speech about why gerrymandering is spiritually corrosive and corrosive to the body politic. And I'm not kidding. It was really awesome.
Thank you.
But then when you said that you didn't want to pack the Supreme Court, it was like that record scratching, like I'm like, and it hurt me. And so I want to dare to change your mind. Because right now, if I have one mission in life, if I can accomplish anything or contribute to the accomplishment of anything political, it would be to pack the fucking court. Medicare for all, campaign finance reform, all these other things that are really important. I would set it all on fire just to pack the court. And I'd like to make the case to you if I could do it.
Sure. Can I just throw out one thing quickly? I'm not
Yes, sir.
against reform. I'm just against creating a mechanism by which like the institution itself would like just become a rubber stamp body. And I've seen so many authoritarian governments around the world do exactly this. Like before, like everything went to like complete shithole status, to use like Trump terminology. And that's what I'd be afraid of. I'd be fine, for example, with it being rotating, where every 5 to 10 years, they're forced to switch. Like it's not permanent for life. It's a temporary position. And so it would be something where essentially every 10 years you'd swap them all out. You'd have some independent board pick the nominees or whatever. I'd be fine with reform, but I don't think that packing an already broken court system that is way too partisan and the partisanship has bled into it from the top down. I think it just makes, you have the same problem. It's just now the court's bigger. And you've opened,
they would not be in balance for the time being. Once
and there's
you have the presidency,
and there's no closing the box again. Like once you've done it, like if the Republicans get power, of course they're going to do it.
Well, yeah, but I mean, with the gerrymandering, you and I are probably both principally opposed to gerrymandering, and the box has been open. We're redistricting everywhere, but like eventually, like we're going to be pushing for no gerrymandering reform, right? So why not do the same with the Supreme Court, but nullify the stacked effects of what has been happening in the past like 10 years?
Yeah, so well, here's what I would say. I mean, I think all three of us principally oppose gerrymandering. Like if we had our druthers, it would be banned nationwide, and there would be some sort of, nonpartisan districting committee responsible in all 50 states to draw districts. And at this point, maybe even our AI overlords could play a role in it as well. But we also recognize that, we can't unilaterally disarm in this political struggle. And we've tried, Democrats have tried, as Dylan well knows. And I think, at this point, Niels, that, there have been at least 2 attempts to ban gerrymandering nationwide, and Republicans blocked it every step of the way because they want to be able to ban gerrymandering nationwide. And so, or they don't want to ban gerrymandering nationwide. They want to have that option for red states. And so when you're put in a position where, we're a duopoly and the opposition party is not a good faith opposition party and they're going for broke, they already have so many institutional advantages and they're looking to further entrench them and to create new ones. I think that, the other party has a moral and political obligation, not just the right, but the obligation to fight back. I view it as political self-defense, quite frankly, because we didn't pick the fight. We're just responding in a tit-for-tat approach. And that's just better than rolling over and hoping that the Republicans show mercy when they're not particularly inclined to, right? So I think we'd all agree that even though it sucks, Newsom and Spanberger did the right thing. And I do want to say, because I've tried to say this in all my commentary today, I mean, real shout out to Governor Spanberger, because like her heart was not in this. She really didn't want to do this. She's very much a centrist technocrat, or maybe I should say moderate technocrat at this point. I mean, I don't want to get in any fucking trouble with what the difference between a moderate and a centrist is. But, she was kind of pushed into it by the political circumstances. And she went along with it. She spent a lot of political capital to get it done. She did get it done, only for the court to kill it. And here's what I would say. The Supreme Court at the federal level is the ultimate impediment to anything the Democrats want to do legislatively. Like, a friend of mine put it kind of in a reductive way, but it captures it beautifully. Like, the Supreme Court in our current system has a better veto than the presidential veto, because like the presidential veto can be overturned with a 2/3 supermajority in both chambers of Congress, but the Supreme Court veto, like that's for life. You would need a constitutional amendment, or you would need to get the Supreme Court to change their mind, right? And what we have here is a system where the least powerful branch, or the branch that was intended to be the least powerful, because the founders made it very clear in the Federalist Papers, are supposed to be the weakest, not weak and not impotent, but the weakest, are in many ways the most powerful because they can not only strike down presidential executive orders, but they can strike down federal statute, right? So that's a law that makes its way from the House to the Senate to the president's desk. So you have Congress and the president, and the Supreme Court can tell both Congress and the president at the same time, fuck you, no, you don't get your way. And so when you have that branch basically holding the leash of the other two, and they're the least accountable, no election, no re-election, lifetime appointments, they don't even have a binding code of ethics. We saw Clarence Thomas, hundreds of thousands of undisclosed like gifts from right-wing billionaires. He just didn't do it. And from his vantage point, why would he? Like, who's gonna fucking hold him accountable, right? And so just all these things are packing up and piling up. And what happened in Virginia, just comes on the backdrop of what they recently did with the Voting Rights Act. And you have a court that is so nakedly partisan, and they're gonna go when it's convenient. They're gonna pick a predetermined outcome and reverse engineering the logic, opinions, and try to pass it off as constitutional interpretation. And my point is, like, if Democrats ever get back in power and they want to do shit that needs to be done, like campaign finance reform or either expanding on the ACA or a Medicare for all option, whatever it is, a right-wing Supreme Court could just kill it. And then that's it. And then we've wasted the political capital and the time that we'll never get back. And we'll probably lose the next election. And the other thing to think about is, because of gerrymandering and because of the 2030 census coming up, by 2030, 2032, all the organs of federal power, if they're not already, will be controlled by the Republicans. It will have a Republican bias. The Electoral College already has a red rule bias. The Senate has a red rule bias because of malapportionment there. Now the House will have, a conservative bias. That used to be our thing, right? As lefty, it's like, okay, you have an uphill climb with the Electoral College and the Senate, but hey, you guys get the House. Well, no, institutionally, they will have a default advantage in the House because of gerrymandering in the VRA decision. And the Supreme Court has been conservative for 50 years, and they have a 6-3 majority, a supermajority. And so it's like, we are not going to be as competitive. I don't think we're locked out of power permanently, but it's going to be a hell of a lot harder for us than it already is. And our path to sustained power, like 2 terms or 2 back-to-back terms, right? So like, a 2-term Democrat followed by a 2-term Democrat, like that's going to be virtually impossible under the current climate, right? And so it seems to me, if we really want to get things done and we want to make the political terrain more competitive, you are going to have to pack the court, because anything else would require a constitutional amendment. And we've only had 27 in 250 years, 10,000 attempts. It's the hardest constitution to amend in the world. So if you want to get rid of presidential immunity, right, which was a terrible decision, which has a corrupt incentive and makes the chief executive untouchable, you're either going to need to pass an amendment or you're going to have to pack the court. Well, packing the court's easier, because all you would need to do is just, change the federal law and take it from 9 to 11 or 9 to 13 or whatever. So I agree that there's a risk in that, when Republicans,
D5D2
go back into power, they're going to do the same thing.
The person who is talking, thank you for saying my point better than I could by throwing.
They would do that already, if that makes any sense. Like, the only reason they're not packing the court now is because they already have a supermajority in the court. Like, if that makes sense. So
yeah, they don't have incentives.
Yeah.
They probably would if we had done the same thing to them, which was steal a seat, do any of these other, like, if they're willing to steal a seat to win, why would they not pack the court to win? Like, they just haven't needed to.
100%. And so I take your point, Dylan. I'm not saying that the risk isn't there, because it will be a tit for tat at that point. You're right. If and when the Republicans get back into power, they'll pack the court. But that's not because Democrats would pack it. It's because the default is that the Republicans have to have a conservative court. And right now they have one, and they already played games to get it with, obviously with, Merrick Garland in 2016. And then they broke their own goddamn rule in 2020 to put Amy Coney Barrett on the court. Like, if they were in our position, they would have done it already. The Republicans will never tolerate a liberal majority court. Again, we really have no reason to believe that they would. And to the extent to which they would tolerate it, it would just be, as soon as they get back into power, they'd be like, well, historically speaking, we've had one Supreme Court justice for every circuit, and there are not 9 circuits, there are 13 circuits. And so, yeah, it just feels like we should expand it to 13, and then they'll pack it again. And so I'm curious. I know I threw a lot at you, and I don't even know if you're still there, but I'm curious what you think.
Dylan just has already exploded from
Dylan's asleep. Dylan walked out of the room, and he is like spread. He's like the lead singer of Creed, and with arms wide open. He's just walking into a field, shouting at the Russians at this point.
I took
Moscow, and I just came back. Actually. Look, Moscow came.
So anyway, I know I threw a lot at you, but I am curious because I do think it's existential. I think if it is the first necessary step of a Democratic trifecta, and I think anything else, if they do anything else before that, we will have failed. So, what do you think?
Well, I'll be honest. I'm not completely convinced. I think you make good arguments as to the benefits of being able to get more bold policies that could make Democrats stay in power longer by doing this. I don't know how offended the American public would be by an act like this. I know when FDR did it, the offense most rather than the administration, but that's also due to the fact they had the Great Depression to worry about. They had so I don't think there would be a lot of PR backlash. I would be much more worried about like institutional backlash when, not if, when Republicans eventually get power. Because as much as we can plan for like the forever, like, I don't know, we're gonna have like an Emperor of Man style Chuck Schumer hooked up to I have no clue.
We will win.
Eventually, we'll lose an election. We'll lose a chamber, and if we pass it over to somebody who does a bad job, which is possible, we could elect President John Fetterman, or we could elect somebody that we thought was good, and then good job. Eventually, it will go over to them again, and I want to be prepared for that outcome because I don't want it to be that we just built 40 years, like 20 years of progress, and they could undo it in 2 years and then go straight back in the other direction because all it requires is one election in the entire system. I'm more sold on getting rid of the filibuster than I am getting rid of the Supreme Court because I think it would allow us to take quicker action on stuff that you just will never be able to get a 2/3 majority on. I'm not convinced that the Supreme Court is going to undo as much legislation as we would want to do. If we wanted to expand the ACA, I don't see how the Supreme Court could turn that over, as we've had the ACA, still have the ACA. They've shrunk the ACA. Would it be constitutional to shrink the ACA, but it wouldn't be constitutional to expand the ACA? They would still need to find some argument to actually make the case for these things. And there has been examples where Trump has put forward cases and he's lost, even with a conservative supermajority. So I'm a little nervous about expanding it because if Trump has that experience in the future, you can just be, well, it won't be Trump, but Trump 2, Trump 3, Trump 4. They can just say, well, you know what, 13, screw 13. Why isn't it 20? Why don't we have a nice even number?
Right.
And that's something that scares me, that if we open the envelope on that, we're giving them the license to do it, especially if we combine that, which you would have to, combine that with getting rid of the filibuster, which would mean it would only take a small Republican majority in order to alter the makeup of the Supreme Court. So we wouldn't even need to lose big to Republicans in order for them to turn this back on us. We would just need to lose one House seat, have them a 50-50 Senate with a vice president, and be up one House seat, and they would be able to do this as long as they don't have any defections. So I do want to say it's not a question of if, it is a question of when. I don't trust Democrats as administrators that much. Perfect. And I also need to ask the question of, can we trust Democrats with this type of power? Can we trust any political party with this type of power? Because, I mean, as much as I might like Joe Biden's leadership style more than Donald Trump, and I don't think he would be the one to do it. I mean, I look through the party rank and file, and I'm like, I don't know if all of these people would be responsible as president of the United States with this a type of power to fundamentally just essentially change how the Constitution bottom, especially if we're doing it in the way where we're essentially using the Supreme Court as a rubber stamp program. I don't know if that's what you want, Josiah. Do you want a legitimate Supreme Court where that's unbiased, like semi not partisan judges, or would you just want like a rubber stamp program to bring about the Great New Deal?
Wait, Josiah, before you answer, tell me if this is something you're kind of working towards, because this is how I understand it. And it's my stream, damn it.
Wait, who are you?
Yeah, exactly. My understanding is, look, right now, the Supreme Court is compromised in such a way that they're like granting these insane decisions like the immunity ruling. We need to pack it so they can't do anything else like that and make sure there aren't some like crazy decisions coming down. But as soon as we have the ability to, and we should very quickly, implement these reforms that Dylan is talking about, rotating cycles of 5-6 years, no lifetime appointments. And like by the time a Republican election rolls around, we've already nipped this in the bud and said, no, this isn't how the Supreme Court works anymore. Now it's a lot more fair. Now we don't have these like opportunities to have this mandatory 40 years of service under this person who's loyal to the person that appointed them. It's just, let's get the power, fix it, and make sure this never happens again, in the same way we're kind of trying to do with gerrymandering.
So I would say a few things. I would say just expanding the court is what I call necessary but insufficient. I do think it is a necessary first step for any sort of robust policy agenda, and also other aspects of court reform too, because you can imagine that any sort of legislative efforts to change the court, the court itself might try to deem these as unconstitutional, right? Like, oh, you have to pass a constitutional amendment to rotate justices in and out. Like there's serious debate over to what extent the court has any sort of jurisdiction over that, or what they could say. So yeah, I would love other reforms as well. Binding code of conduct, expanding the court, term limits, or rotate them out, and you put them at another, they retain their federal judgeship, but they're just no longer presiding over cases on the Supreme Court. It's like a Supreme Court emeritus or whatever. Like, all of that sounds great, but again, it's just, even that, I would argue, based on what I have read from prominent conservative influencers, and quite frankly, even, Republican officials, as well as just tracking their behavior, my expectation is this. Let's say we get back into power and you decide not to expand the court, but you try to enact the alternative reforms that you and Dylan are talking about. My expectation is that if and when Republicans get back into power, they'll try to punish you for that anyway. It's a very much an abusive relationship, because they had a good thing going under this version of the court, this unfettered version of the court. And if you fuck with it in any respect, even if you don't expand it, I suspect that they'll try to make you pay for that. And, for example, here's why I think that. Great example. So in 2016, when they created that new rule, we can't confirm a Supreme Court justice in an election year. Obviously, there's nothing in the Constitution about that. Like the Article 2 prerogative of a president to nominate a Supreme Court justice, it doesn't say only in the first 3 years of their term, not the fourth year, right? That's just a new rule that Mitch McConnell created. And McConnell's, I use this clip all the time, because there was a really big 60 Minutes expose back on Mitch McConnell a year ago. And it involved McConnell and his career, and his authorized autobiographer, somebody who was working with McConnell, collaborating with McConnell, emails in his journal and blah, 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 to write this authorized, definitive Mitch McConnell biography. Well, in the 60 Minutes interview, when they ask about Merrick Garland, the biographer himself says, look, this was absolutely a brute force application of politics by McConnell. McConnell can say what he wants, but I've got his notes, I've got everything. McConnell made the decision when Scalia died, instantly, because he was actually on vacation, that Obama was not going to get this nominee, because fuck Obama. And then he told his staff, after he made the decision, come up with a reason that I can try to justify this. So again, he settled on a politically expedient outcome and reverse engineered the logic, much like the court often does. And that's when they came up with, we can't, fill this vacancy so close to an election in an election year. And that's what they announced. And then a few months later, they changed it again. They were like, actually, you could do it in an election year if the Senate and the president were the same party. And again, total bullshit, right? But what was funny was Lindsey Graham said at the time, hey, look, I know we're changing the rules on you, Democrat. And there's a clip of him doing this, not just a quote. He did this on camera in the Senate. It was the top Republican on the Judiciary Committee said, I want you all to use my words against me. We're going to be consistent. If Donald Trump wins the 2016 election, and in the next election year, there's a vacancy in 2020, when Donald Trump is president, we will not confirm Donald Trump's nominee. And what did they do? They confirmed Donald Trump's nominee in 2020 when it happened. And when Lindsey Graham was confronted, like, hey, you said use your own words against you. Hear your words, motherfucker. What changed? He said, well, I didn't like the way you guys treated Brett Kavanaugh during the Kavanaugh hearings. So I'm taking back what I said. So my point is,
you guys are mean to me.
Right. So my point is, anything you do that in any way intrudes upon or intervenes with the Republican Party's unfettered control of the court, be it ethics reform. The Republicans fought on ethics reform in 2023 when all those stories about Clarence Thomas came out. They fought. They didn't want hearings about it. They refused to issue subpoenas. They didn't want investigations. They refused to back court reform for ethics, for judicial ethics. Why? Because Clarence Thomas reliably votes on the court in ways that align with the Republicans. They don't give a fuck if he has a few $100,000 worth of undisclosed gifts. So my point is, even if you take court expansion off the table and you try to do anything that in any way curbs the behavior of the supermajority court, they're going to fuck you. The Republicans will take revenge when they're back into power. So I think you got to go big or go home, right? You either expand the court and do what you want with the court, like binding codes of ethics and rotating, term limits and blah, 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 all that shit. Or you do nothing, because if you do anything at all, the Republicans will punish you just like they would if you expand the court, if and when they get back into power. And then I'll say this as far as like Dylan's questions go. I love the idea. I know it's cringe to say, but I still love the West Wing, at least the first 5 seasons of the West Wing. I love the idea.
Sucker out of here, man. Oh, God.
Yeah.
Why don't we all just come together and work together and have a
I love the idea of that.
Democratic president.
Right. I love the idea of that. But that's not where we are. That's probably never been where we are, and that certainly will never be there again if we were ever there in the first place. And so to your question about the court, do I want an independent court? I'd love that, but I don't believe that thing exists. I believe that the Supreme Court are partisan political actors. They're not as partisan as members of Congress, but they are partisan. And why wouldn't they be? Like, I hear Gorsuch is doing a book tour now, and he's so fucking cringe. He's like, don't you want a judge? Like, he enunciates in a really weird way. He's like, don't you want a judge who only looks to himself for his rulings? He doesn't have to worry. It's like, actually, that's kind of fucking scary when you put it like that, you fucking idiot. Like, he's so terrified about having a judge who's, succumbs to public pressure, but it's like the alternative is also scary. The idea of a judge who is unaccountable to no one and nothing, and everything is entirely up to them. The system that we have for the Supreme Court incentivizes them to be as partisan as possible. Why wouldn't they be? Because they're insulated from any sort of backlash. They don't have to really even pretend past a certain. Fucking Alito was flying a January 6th flag in his front yard. Like, who does that? You know what I'm saying? So at the end of the day, as much as I wish we had an independent court, if I have to choose between a quote unquote independent court that is a 6-3 conservative supermajority and gives the Republicans whatever they want, or a liberal rubber stamp that will give us Medicare for all and campaign finance reform and all that shit, I'll take a liberal rubber stamp.
I understand the arguments you're making. They're convincing, but I'm still not convinced that this is the best strategy in order to get the outcomes we want. Because I acknowledge that any change is going to open up the envelope, that if we make any reform, that they're going to say, well, you made this change, so we can go even further. But that doesn't mean we need to overshoot in a way that will make it so that if Republicans get back in power, we're going to have 14 Rudy Giuliani's on the Supreme Court.
Dylan, the fundamental question is, do you think that Republicans wouldn't do it if, one, they needed to, or they thought they could get away with it? Because I think me and Josiah are coming from a place of like, of course they would. So why not go past the like, they're going to escalate it every time, get it to a point where we're going to be in control long enough to like actually get anything done. And then past that, you know, hopefully it'll work out. But like, why wait for them to do what they've been doing for the past 10 years, which is like escalating, breaking the rules, defining new rules. Like, why are we doing it on their terms?
I think it's important to do it on their not their terms. It's important to do it on America's terms, knowing that if we do pack the Supreme Court, we will make. You said something earlier that was interesting. That the Supreme Court was made as the weakest institution, not as an infantile organization that you can't do anything, but as the weakest. What we're proposing would make the Supreme Court one of the strongest, if not the strongest, branch of government in the country. If we make
How is it not already?
How is it not already?
Yeah, like what's the difference between a partisan Supreme Court that will
say
like
the difference is
most of what the
not most, everything. That's the difference. The difference would be if Donald Trump said, I think we can have elections 2032. The Supreme Court says, okay, yeah, we can delay the elections. This is a national emergency. Sure. A Supreme Court that is not hold to anything but the fact that they can be put in. It's completely partisan. We admit the partisanship of the court, and we just expand it anytime we take power in order to try to push out the previous Supreme Court members. I think that it will just degrade the Supreme Court to the most partisan institution in the nation, while also strengthening it so you can essentially rewrite the Constitution by winning an election. Like, not because you actually got the majorities to do so, just because you won the election. Now, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of the press, the Second Amendment, like all of these things could potentially be put on the chopping block with no restrictions, no decisions against the people who are in power, because you're literally just creating a rubber stamp institution at that point. Like, here's a question. Do you guys think Jerome Powell is a partisan man?
No.
No. Do we all agree?
He seems to be like one of the like very like of all the ways he could be partisan. It's like he's so clearly like respects his position and wants to remain impartial the way it's meant to be. Yeah.
And can I just say real quick why I think it, because I'm normally not a believer in like nonpartisan independent actors, but I think the case for Powell is pretty substantial. He was first appointed by Trump and then reappointed by Biden. So right out the gate, there's like bipartisan consensus. And he has acted in ways that politically fucked over both parties. So, you know, Democrats like Elizabeth Warren was furious that he was not cutting interest rates in 2023 and 2024 when it would have politically advantaged the Democrats. But he stood fast and just refused. And he's also not cutting interest rates to the extent and to the frequency that Trump wants, which is pissing off Trump. So he basically has bipartisan support and a history of pissing off both sides in equal measure.
So would we agree then that the Fed is not a very partisan institution? Not that there's no partisanship in any of its board members, but that compared to the Supreme Court, it is not as partisan. Would we agree?
I would say pre-Trump turn 2, yes, but remember he's trying to purge the Fed, and he's appointing that guy to take Powell's place, who won't even acknowledge that Joe Biden won the 2020 election.
True. He is doing that, but it's also different. But
so I think
but the Fed chair isn't the one who also dictates Fed policy. It's the board, which Jerome Powell will still stand on, and there's still going to be a majority of board members that are not. I'm trying to use something besides the R slur, but that are not, you know, of that ilk.
You can say retarded. It's my stream.
It's but
well, I think they will be. I think well, hang on. I can't remember, and I'm too lazy to Google it right now. But I'm pretty sure once what's his face gets confirmed, which now he's supposed to, because Tom Tillis, my senator, said that he's lifting the blockade, is that the Federal Reserve will be a majority like Republican appointees, Trump appointees, and then if and when Jerome Powell resigns, because once his term as Fed chair ends, he still has his term as just a member of the Board of Governors, but the custom is they just resign from the board after their term as chair ends. And Powell suggested that he'll stay on at least for a while. But if he resigns before 2028, then it will be up to Trump to fill that vacancy too. So it either is about to be controlled by a majority of Trump appointees, like it's either about to be, or it is already, or it's about to be. It's one of the two.
I don't believe it is.
But otherwise, pre-Trump, I agree with you. I totally agree with you. Pre-Trump, that the Fed was pretty independent.
Do you think that an independent Fed operates better than one controlled by the President of the United States directly?
10,000%, 100%, yes.
Okay. Would you say that one that is controlled by the President of the United States becomes basically like it's not even an organization anymore? The whole point is that it's supposed to be independent and it doesn't even have a purpose to exist.
Yes.
Okay. I would make the same argument for the Supreme Court. My only argument is that it could be even more destructive because we're talking about rewriting the Constitution. So my argument isn't that, hey, the Supreme Court isn't partisan. My argument is, if we want this institution to work, just accepting it as a partisan institution, saying that's how it's going to work. I mean, it almost feels like it's like gerrymandering. Well, gerrymandering's around, so we're going to do gerrymandering. That's the goal forever. Well, the Supreme Court, it's partisan, so it's going to be partisan forever. Well, it seems Donald Trump's making the Fed partisan, so we're going to make that partisan as well. So that means that these organizations essentially flip all of their values based upon one election. Or when it comes to the Supreme Court, based upon when they die or not, right? And I think all of this is flawed from the bottom up. And it's just not going to work when it comes to running the country long term. It might work when it comes to getting a few policy objectives through, but when we lose that election, or we have somebody who pushes a little bit too far when it comes to somebody's rights, that worries me quite a bit. And that's why I'm more reform based, something that should be trying to find a way to bring back the lack of partisanship that you would want to see in a Supreme Court, that you'd want to see in the Fed, rather than trying to hypercharge it. Plus, it would be much harder for our opposition to argue for the hypercharging of the partisanship in response to a bill called killing partisanship in the Supreme Court or something along. It would be much harder for them both politically and amongst their entire caucus, especially if it's coming after a Trump loss in 2028. I just don't think this is a fight that we necessarily need to surrender at the gates and just say, let's hope Republicans don't win, because if they do, we're fucked.
But
Yeah, well, I
that's
get-
where we're already at.
Yeah, I
Guy and I
was
are
gonna say,
we are
yeah.
fucked because Republicans won. We're barely hanging on. They're changing all the institutions. The guardrails are being eroded. It's
wait. Would you say if it was impossible for Trump to lose the Supreme Court case, the situation would be much worse?
Yeah, of course.
If he could bring any case I think Nancy Pelosi's gay, she's going to prison, and he could just do whatever he wanted.
Don't give him any ideas. We got 3 years left.
But my point is, I understand that this would give us some power in the interim in order to try to right the ship. But unless we're these type of transcendent dictator where we right the ship, and then at the end of the righting of the ship, we then reform the institution to reestablish its lack of partisan nature. But doing that is going to be seen as so ingenuine, because people will say, oh, so you righted the ship, restored partisanship, and just so happened to use that to advance all of your policy priorities. It's going to be very difficult to make that argument seriously.
Yeah, so listen, I take your point that Trump can still and has still lost some Supreme Court cases, but even again, the big one that he lost that everyone refers to is the tariffs case, right? That's the most recent high profile. That was that wasn't the Supreme Court, but that was that was a circuit court or trade court or something like that over tariffs. But yeah, obviously when lower in circuit courts, Trump takes L's all the time. The Supreme Court's a bit different because look at the tariffs decision, and I think Destiny's made this point too, but I know I have, and I've done this, and I think Pisco has as well. So the tariffs decision, compare and contrast, right? The tariffs were facially unconstitutional as implemented by Trump. Like most legal experts, including conservative legal experts, Jonathan Turley, who's never met a MAGA talking point on Fox News that he hasn't, masturbated to, Andy McCarthy, all the guys at the National Review and the Wall Street Journal, blah, 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 blah. Ben Shapiro, like everybody was like, the tariffs are facially unconstitutional because they are a tax. And that is that you're usurping the taxing authority of the Congress, which is arguably its principal authority. You have no power there. It's like, you're supposed to be fucking, it's like one of those things from the Two Towers, like you have no power here. Like that's how impotent Trump is supposed to be in the realm of taxation. And he's single-handedly slapping a tax on the rest of the world and by extension, the US. They took forever to hear that case. And when they took the case up, they took forever to decide the case. And in the meantime, they let him continue to levy the tariffs. Now, meanwhile, when Joe Biden started to talk about student loan forgiveness, they slapped that shit down. They're like, hey, asshole, we're going to hear this case. And in the meantime, you may not give student loan forgiveness. We are hitting pause until such a time as we decide to hit delete. And with Trump, was something infinitely more unconstitutional and infinitely more sweeping. The court is so biased. They were like, fuck, we're going to rule against him. But in the meantime, we're just going to let him do it. Like, even then, like Trump's defeat on tariffs, like it's really not as comprehensive as people talk about. Like, yeah, it's a big deal, but they pulled their punches even with that as much as they possibly could, to say nothing of presidential immunity, which I maintain is the worst Supreme Court decision, at least in modern American history, making the president effectively unaccountable to any sort of like criminal prosecution and total betrayal of our constitutional values. Like, they rule, when they occasionally rule against Trump, they do everything in their power to soften the blow. Like even the Kilmar Abrego Garcia thing, just this naked violation of due process. They're like, fine, you need to effectuate his return, or you have to facilitate his return, but we're not ordering you to effectuate it. And it's like this court, even when it rules against Trump, rules against him in such a lame ass way. It's not just that it does so infrequently. It's like it pulls its punches when it finally lands one. Like it's just like a little slap on the cheek. And so I'll also point out that nobody trusts this court. Like court approval and court trust, the American people, they're not happy with this thing and haven't been for some time. And so it's not like we'd be taking an institution which is widely respected and driving it into the ground. It's already viewed as kind of a partisan hack court, and I think for good reason. I mean, I take your point. Would it lose further legitimacy if it was just transparently a naked football political football between the Democrats and Republicans? Yes, I do agree with you there. Like they would go from 14% approval down to like 4 or 10. I would rather have a liberal court 50% of the time than deal with a Supreme Court that's conservative 100% of the time, that rules in favor of the conservatives 80% of the time, if that makes sense. I would rather have the wild swings where at least I get my way half the time.
We'd have like two constitutions then.
Yeah, I guess
because they'd be interpreting it either one way, either every other cycle.
Well, yeah, it'd be like whenever the other party wins, we have a different constitution. Like my marriage rights could exist one year and then they don't exist the next year. Like, how does somebody build anything in a country where your fundamental foundational document just changes every 4 years?
But you see, what's interesting is, like, again, I take your point. I think that's a great question. And I want to be clear, like, I'm acknowledging that there are wild swings. I'm just saying, like, the upshot is half of those swings would be in our favor. But to your point, I would also argue that we kind of live, maybe not with gay marriage per se. I mean, even though Clarence Thomas was like, after Dobbs, we should totally revisit Obergefell, right? Like, if he had his way, and we don't know what future MAGA, dipshit justices who replace Thomas and Alito, what they might look like. I certainly 100% believe that I could see Gorsuch and Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett, maybe not Roberts, but I could see a conservative majority under the right case be willing to do to gay marriage what they did to abortion. Oh, we're not outlawing it. We're just sending it back to the states, right? But set that aside. We already have a system.
For a second, though, to be clear, it could be send back to the states, or it could be they ban gay marriage across the whole. Like, if there's no restriction and it's just you just basically make a call to whoever is the senior justice that you've appointed, and you say decide this way, then like essentially like you don't even have a constitution. You're just ruled by whatever.
Yeah, well, that's still technically. I mean, that's still technically in the cards right now, and they could do that. Like, that's the problem with our current notion of judicial review.
But then
is
Trump wouldn't
like
lose
right now,
decisions where he has to pay $166 billion back. He wouldn't lose these court cases, period, if that's the environment we lived in. And he wouldn't be ranting when he loses those court cases against individual conservative justices who just wouldn't rape the Constitution that badly that day.
Right, but so again, I take your point on the tariffs decision, but like number one, we don't even know what those refunds are going to look like if they go through. Number two,
no, they're being rolled out fucking next month. They're being rolled out really soon, actually. The first payments are being made, actually, right? Like really, really soon.
Okay, I mean, he's got a peace deal in Ukraine, and really, really soon too, and with
Well,
Iran
when I say
as well.
really soon, I mean like 2 weeks. I mean like there's a date.
Well, he says 2 weeks.
Wait, guys, real quick. Yeah. My mom's calling. I'm gonna put her on speaker for 10 seconds. She has to be in this call. Wow. Mom, you're on my 201,567 subscriber special stream. Do you want to say hi to people?
Yeah, I forgot about that.
That is wonderful. Give him money.
Thanks, Mom. It's very Jewish of you. Is this important, or should I call you back later?
Do you look?
Sorry? All right, I can't hear you, Mom.
Did she just hang up on you?
I think
she just hung up on you.
Yeah, she's just like, oh.
She fucking hit the fuck you button. I mean, so I'll wrap up with this, I guess. I'll say I'm still not confident that those refunds are coming out. They're certainly not going to American citizens. They'll be, if they do go out, they'll go to the companies.
They're going to the companies.
Yeah, they'll go to the companies. So we, the people, got fleeced no matter what, and there's going to be no recompense there. But again, I take your point that under the current system, the Supreme Court only rules in Trump's favor 80% of the time or 90%. And then 50% of the time, in my scenario, they could rule in his favor 100% of the time. 50% of the time, right? I don't know. I would rather have the upside than the consistent downside. Like, I would rather have higher highs and risk lower lows than very few highs and constant lows, if that makes any sense. And I just don't see that changing anytime soon. And I
don't mean this to be pointed, but I often find it difficult sometimes when talking to people on the American left for them to imagine how bad it can actually get. And I think that sometimes when we adopt strategies, we look at it naively hopeful that the way it's going to go isn't going to be we change the Supreme Court and then we lose the exact next midterm and then everything's shit from there. We imagine it more to be we do this to the Supreme Court, then we got Medicare for all, then we got this, then we got that, and then everybody's accepted Democratic. The Democrats are so wonderful and so great, and then everybody says hail Chuck Schumer, or whatever the vision would be. I see many more ways for it to go wrong, and I think a more selective approach would be efficacious, and that means I could understand either filibuster reform or abolishment in order to make Supreme Court reform, but to just blatantly turn it into we have two constitutions, two different administrations, two different countries every 4 to 8 years. This seems like it's something that could hypercharge us down the worst pathway for the health of the republic. And that's the reason why I'm so hesitant here, is that it's not that I'm naive on Republicans, it's that I'm not.
Yeah, so I guess I would say this, and you don't have to answer these questions now. Something to think about. We'll continue to check in. I'll check your pulse. I'll do a vibe check every quarter, see where you are with it. I take your point. It could be worse, and I want to be clear. I totally acknowledge it could be worse. But here's how I look at it. Well, actually, I do have a question for you because I meant to ask this earlier. If Democrats take control of the Senate the last 2 years under Trump, and there's a vacancy on the court. Should Democrats give Trump that vacancy? Or should they do what Republicans did to Obama and say, no, we're keeping this for a Democrat. Go fuck yourself.
They should do the same thing back. They should hold it. They should do the same thing. Reciprocal action is the only way you could make both sides ever even roll their eyes at the idea at reform and an acknowledgement of it. If there's reform that would only help Democrats, then there's going to be no motivation for the other side to even want the reform. But if it's a situation where the Republicans are actively getting fucked while the Democrats have power, then that might be the moment you might actually be able to get reform.
Right. That's good. I appreciate that answer. That to me is the correct answer too, that, we have the right to respond in kind. So what I'm trying to get you, I guess, and because I started there too. I was initially, for the longest time, I opposed Supreme Court reform. And then a few years ago, I slowly started to get radicalized in that direction. And it all started with an acknowledgement that we do recognize, unless we're total cucks, we do recognize that Democrats do have a right at some point to hit back, right? Like gerrymandering, right? It's a good example. We didn't start that fight, but it is self-defense. And if you come up to me in a bar and hit me in the face, I have the right to hit you back, and you don't have the right to bitch. I'm not going to start the fight, but I will hit back, right? Like that mentality, to use the metaphor. And it's the same thing with like the Supreme Court and the Senate. You all fucked us with Obama and Merrick Garland. We have every right to fuck you back. And if you cry about it, we will masturbate with your tears as lubricant. That's how much joy we will have. It starts there, and I think over time, what you might find is just really where you draw the line at the end of the day. Like it sounds like you are open to a more ruthless Democratic Party. It's just right now you feel that the risk of packing the court is such that you're not prepared to endorse that move yet. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, if there came to a point where there was no other option and there was like the only escape hatch and you would pull this, and then under that from there you would reform it. But even then it wouldn't be, this is the solution. This would be more like a very radical step on to hopefully get to more solid footing. Because there's like I don't want to get to the point where we're just accepting that like basically the Constitution just changes every 4 years, right? It's stayed it's like the longest surviving active Constitution. And that is something that I think deserves respect and deserves to be cared for. And I think messing up that rhythm, that history, for a move that might require reform instead of just complete destruction, which is how I view is just basically completely flipping the table and hoping that it lands the right way. I'm very hesitant because I don't want to make a really bad calculation in the grand experiment, to use flowery language.
No, I get that. I would just argue if the Supreme Court is the ultimate interpreter of the Constitution changes all the time anyway, right? I mean, look at where the Constitution is now under our current Supreme Court compared to where it was 100 years ago or 100 years before that. That's the thing. Everybody's bound by Supreme Court precedent except the Supreme Court. Dobbs was precedent and then super precedent until it wasn't, right? And so you do have these wild swings, usually not in like a 4-year stretch, but over a span of decades. The Constitution is radically reinterpreted. But I take your point. I understand you're not there yet, and this was fun. I liked having this conversation with you, Dylan, especially because I know you obviously with your career, you're putting your life on the line, focusing on foreign policy and in this foreign war. But everybody, don't sleep on Dylan in the sense that there's also there's a grade A domestic politics analysis brain there too. It's not just foreign policy. And so, this is why you used to advise people at the congressional level, man. This is you as a campaign advisor again. You put that hat back on and had a robust domestic policy discussion. And
It's been good to get some engagement with domestic policy again, or really just any type of organizing. Track Ukraine has been like a real good high for me. Not only like how successful it's been in a very short period of getting to talk to so many campaigns, seeing how much like there's actually like respect for the issue, or at least the weight of the issue, certainly in the Democratic Party, but like just working on projects. Like I got a documentary this weekend releasing on lead poisoning in Baltimore and landlords like paying off inspectors in order to allow them to not maintain it. And like, so I love domestic affairs. It's just, you know, largest war in Europe since World War II. It seems to drag my attention quite a bit.
Yeah, I think that's pretty understandable. I just, you know, people sometimes I think maybe pigeonhole you as, oh, he's the war guy, the foreign policy guy, and it's like, he's
war guy
pretty formidable in both realms.
He's the war guy.
He's the war guy. He's out there waging it on a daily basis.